Some have told us, first of all, that evil is a necessary counterpart to good. That is, if you're going to have good, you got to have evil whereby to define it, right? Wrong. Because you see, if that's the case, you make God evil by necessity. The good God must, if you're to mean it when you say that he's good, also be evil. He must be God and the demons together. Not only that, you limit God's creative abilities with respect to certain laws. If there are laws of logic or laws of empirical fact which necessitate God to bring good about only through having a counterpart in evil, then you have limited him to those laws in one way or another. And so you don't have an omnipotent God and you don't have a good God, and therefore you don't have the problem of evil. Now, a second way of avoiding the problem is to say that evil is a means to the good, that God is making better people out of us, kind of wearing off the rough edges, if you will. It's the conditions of nurture in this life, as John Hick at Princeton is wont to put it. Now, we have to ask, though, playing the devil's advocate for the sake of the unbeliever, is God limited to those means? Could he not attain the same good via another channel? If he can't, he's not omnipotent. If he's not omnipotent, there's no problem to evil. Beyond that, of course, in context, perhaps it's the case that good contributes also to ultimate evil. And so you can reverse the apologetic on the believer by simply saying, well, if evil leads to good, it might be that good leads to evil. What's most ultimate? So we don't answer the question. But even more than that, you see, it removes your obligation to get rid of evil in the world. If God's put evil in the world to make us better people, to wear off our rough edges, make us determined, steadfast, courageous people, then if you get rid of evil, we can't be courageous, determined people. So you have to keep evil. And, of course, that's just absurd in light of the Christian scriptures. A third approach, I think, cavalier approach, is to say, by the way, I should have introduced these comments with this qualification. In none of these cases am I saying that what is being affirmed is not true. So happens in the first case, it's not true. But in all the other cases, I think that there's an element, if not actual truth, to what's being said. But it's not the truth that I'm talking about. It's the adequacy as an answer to the problem of evil. That is, it is true that God does use the evil of this world to effect good ends. That's true, but it does not answer why evil is here to begin with. So keep that in mind. We're talking about apologetic answers, not what actually is the case in the world necessarily. The third answer is that God warns us by means of evil, and he punishes us by means of evil. Our sinfulness is to be punished, and we're to be warned against that sinfulness by the threat of punishment and also those effects in the historical world of suffering. But the unbeliever says, well, now, if that's God's way of bringing people to himself, it's certainly the most ineffective way he could have thought of. For you see, it's the problem of evil which turns people against him. It doesn't draw them to him at all. Is there not a more benevolent way for God to draw people to himself? You might think of that old child's story of the wind and the sun debating how they're going to get the traveler's coat off. And the wind says, well, I'll do it. I'll just knock it off him. So, boom, he throws out the wind and just does everything he can. But, of course, the more the wind blows, the more the man pulls the jacket around him and holds on tightly. The sun says, I'll show you how to do it. He just beams out there, and the man gets so warm, he takes it off willingly. And the unbeliever says, then why can't God be like that? He wants to draw people to himself. He certainly doesn't know how to get people to be followers of him if that's what he's trying to do. Not only that, the distribution of suffering is not proportioned to man's virtue in this world at all. The innocent suffer, and the relatively innocent bear the greater condemnation in this life. So why does God punish the wrong men? Why does God punish animals at all? The fourth way, which I think is inadequate, is to say that God works through evil. He restrains evil, he atones for evil, and he will eventually eliminate evil. And as a biblical Christian, I affirm all of those, but it's not going to satisfy the unbeliever to bring up those inadequate answers. For you see, what we're saying is God's going to clear up the mess. But the question is not, will God take care of it, but why did God allow it? Why is there a mess to begin with? Why didn't he disallow the possibility of sin? What is accomplished by hell after all? And then the quick answer, which is the fifth answer, is, of course, it's free will that explains it. Because man freely chose the evil. And I agree that man freely chose the evil, and that originated evil in this world. At least in our cosmos. I don't want to deny that Satan had fallen before man. But that is not going to be adequate. And I have a number of lectures on the question of free will and evil that I can't go into. So let me quickly refer most of you who are Presbyterians just to your own creed. If you look at the Westminster Confession of Faith, you go through this posse, non pecari, and so forth. Well, when you get down to the end of the line, you read that when men get to heaven, non posse, pecari, it's not possible to sin. Not possible to sin in heaven. And yet they're free, aren't they? Anybody want to maintain when you go to heaven you're going to be an automaton? No, you're going to maintain that you're fully under God's sovereign control, and that's why you won't sin. But now, if you're free when you're in heaven, and obviously you are, you're not less than a man, and if you're controlled by God in such a way that you can't sin, then evil is not necessary to free will. It is logically compatible to say that men will freely do the good and eternally do it. And so the question comes, why didn't God ordain that state of affairs from the very beginning? And so I can't dwell on these, but I just want to show you that what I'm going to deal with today is not these cavalier philosophic responses. But we must take evil seriously, and we must see it in its most stringent, logical form.